I've been rigging in Live 2D for about 4 years now. In that time, I've taken several commissions, rigged a variety of different art styles, won one of these things, got my moments of clout for getting a little bit silly with it. I've had several people ask about my process over the years, or request tutorials from me, so in the interest of giving the people what they want, I recorded the entire art and rigging process of my latest model from start to finish. I don't claim to be a Live 2D master, but I will claim the professional title. So even though this won't be the most in-depth look into my process, I still think this video will be valuable to anyone looking to learn Live 2D, or anyone interested in me rigging something really, really fast. You'll notice pretty immediately that there isn't a whole lot of animating happening from the get-go. Model files usually require a decent amount of setup before anything actually starts moving around, like clipping layers, setting up deformers and parameters, mesh editing, texture atlas, etc, etc. I do a good amount of this setup right in the beginning just to clean up the file visually, but I'll also save setting up certain parts as I get to them, just depending on how I feel in the moment, honestly. My whole process is pretty loose. You'll see me go back and tweak things throughout the entire recording. When I finally do get around to rigging, I always start with the mouth and eyes since I need to know how their different forms will work before I get around to rigging the face angles. It makes my process a bit smoother. If you plan on adding a lot of physics to your eyes, I'd recommend creating deformers to keyframe the different eye parts rather than keyframing the textures raw. Generally, for things like eyes and mouth parts, it's okay to keyform textures, but just remember that keyforming a texture is pretty much endgame for that texture, and you'll struggle to get any more movement from more than about 2 parameters. You'll also notice for the mouth I make a lot of deformers larger than they need to be. This is just me preparing for the 3D movement of the mouth. It'll make more sense when I get to rigging the face angles. I'll get back to things like AR kit and V-Bridger later in the video. Admittedly, I procrastinated on those things in the beginning since I really don't like doing them. With the eye and mouth movement now complete, we can move on to rigging the face angles, which is in my opinion the most important part of a VTuber rig. This is really where I think being an artist starts to become crucial to the process, since as riggers, we're trying to convincingly pass off 2D as 3D, which as an artist you would have a lot of experience in. This isn't to say you couldn't become adequate at rigging otherwise. I'm not going to claim to be an authority on this, but even a basic understanding of perspective, facial planes, and general art fundamentals will take you miles. You'll notice I make a lot of use of temporary perspective deformers throughout the face angles process, especially for those gnarly corner angles. I find them very useful after synthesizing corners, highly recommend. Also, I'll go ahead and place objects that exist roughly on the same face plane in one deformer. For example, the eyes and mouth will all go under one deformer. Saves me a lot of time and grief for their overall movement, and if I want to fine-tune them afterwards, I still have the option to individually deform them. In hindsight, I would have rigged the long hair tentacles a bit differently, since physics are gonna just like whip them around everywhere. You can see each tentacle only got one deformer for X and Y, when I should have given them two each. One for the actual warp deformation, and one parenting one to reposition it afterwards. This would have made physics go a lot smoother, but I got lazy and I didn't want to go back and redo everything, so I had to sit in my mistakes. I think the physics turned out fine in the end, but they might have looked even better had I been more patient in the beginning. Moving on to the body rigging now, I'm going to be starting with the Y and Z angles. Most of the leg movements is going to be coming from these two parameters too. I think there's a lot to be done stylistically here, since this kind of body movement will have a big impact on the personality of the model. A shy character might move their body a little bit more timidly, while a more suggestive character might get a lot of hip swing out of those movements. For Pinna here, I made it seem like she was shifting her body weight from one leg to the other, with just a little bit of sass in the hips. I generally prefer my model's feet to stay planted with minimal movement, since I feel like it makes all the movement on the model seem a bit more intentional overall. But if you wanted to add those little famous VTuber steppies in, you do it here. Another thing for that Y body movement, you could potentially have the model angle their body forward rather than position it up and down. You know, it's that famous VTuber lean. If you wanted to try this out, I'd be careful, since exaggerating the perspective too much might make the model look really awkward at different sizes. If you don't mind that, then just ignore me though. Body X should be pretty straightforward, since unless you did like a lean on body Y, you won't need to combine any angles. Deforming arm parts here is generally optional. I'll decide whether or not to rig them based on each model individually. I'm gonna finish off the body rigging now by jumping the gun a little bit and going ahead and adding physics to her arms and hands. This is a model-specific rigging choice that I made, since her arms and hand posing is very unique. I wanted to make sure I emphasize that with the rig as well. Alright, so I'm finally getting back around to finishing V-Bridger and AR kit for the mouth here. I'm honestly pretty garbage at this. Like when I take commissions with V-Bridger, I usually outsource that part to another Live 2D friend of mine. I'm not going to talk much on this, but I pretty much just followed the official V-Bridger tutorial to a T, so I'll link that in the description. This might be controversial, but I feel like most models will need more than 2 pendulums per physics group for the hair physics. I think 2 is the perfect amount and will often give you more range of motion than having 3 or more. So for hair physics, I have 4 parameters total, 2 for X movement and 2 for Y movement. It's also worth noting that rigging physics is one of my weaker points, so, you know. finish up the base of this model, I add physics to the rest of the body, clothes, and whatever else I feel like. I don't know if you noticed, but this character has these stupid massive tentacle belt things as a selling point of the design, so I make sure to give them extra care here. What's really cool is if you listen very closely, you can hear my third eye open in real time as glue finally starts to click for me. Lastly, I've been procrastinating on those silly little toggles. No extra expressions for this model, but it's got 3 props: a keytar, a mic, and a tablet plus a stylus. I hope this video is able to properly convey why toggle prices can increase exponentially. With each toggle, especially with arm toggles, I have to consider the position and angle of anything I might be interacting with, including the more fickle parameters like with physics. These particular toggles are independent from each other for the most part, with the exception that I also want to toggle the jacket on and off, which means both the bare arms and the jack arms have to interact seamlessly with every toggle and body angle. On top of that, the microphone roughly has to track the mouth at every angle. This is why live 2D animators tend to implode on occasion. Occupational hazard, I guess. And a brisk 15 hours later, we're up one Vtuber model. Since recording the process, I've touched up the rig just a bit, but only stylistically, nothing fundamental has changed. From here, all that's left to do is set everything up in Vtube Studio and tweak things to taste. Thanks everyone for watching! If you want to see more of me, I'll be debuting very soon on Twitch. Or if you just can't wait, I've got some videos up on YouTube already. I really want to do more YouTube content. I'm not sure how much more informative or scripted videos like this one you can expect, but I've had a lot of fun editing my VODs down and singing covers, so be on the lookout for more of those. See ya!